right here on KAZ Radio, where I have one of my most favorite shows, none other than Christian Networking Entrepreneurs with Pastor Teresa McCurry. How you doing, Pastor T?
I'm doing wonderful, Apostle. How about yourself?
Great, thanks.
Thank you for having us. So we're excited to be here on CNE, Christian Networking Entrepreneurs. As you all know, Christian Networking Entrepreneurs is for emerging entrepreneurs, small business owners, and community leaders. And today we have a community leader that has been leading in the community for a very long time. Help me and welcome me our guest, Councilman Matt Zone. Councilman Zone, welcome to the show.
Pastor T, it's my pleasure to be with you. It's always great to be in the presence of you. I always feel one step closer to God when I'm on you.
I love it. I love it. So I'm excited to have you on as well. I know you've been busy and been doing a lot of things and doing a great work in our community. So we're just going to dive on in. So in the beginning, we always ask our guests to tell us a little bit about themselves, where they've been, their journey, what they've accomplished, what they've been exposed to. Now, we don't want the watered down PG version. We want to know all the right stuff that got you to where you are today. And then I'll ask you some questions in between.
All right. I appreciate that. Well, Pastor T, I'm a lifelong Clevelander, born and raised here on the near west side in the Detroit Shoreway Gordon Square neighborhood. Second youngest of 9 children. Our parents grew us. We were raised in a large, loving family. And I have 5 sisters, and I'm one of 4 boys. Fortunately, a couple of my siblings have passed on, so has my mother and my father. But, they were real trailblazers in their own right, and they really wanted to empower their children when we were growing up, that we had to give back and get involved in the community. It wasn't something that was encouraged. It was almost something that was required. Mom wanted to make sure when you were a young person, all my sisters, we did the whole active, get involved in social clubs and in Cub Scouts and Girl Scouts and Rotary clubs, staying busy at our school. And early on, that foundational work, I think, really helped and led to a lot of great things that some of my siblings have gone on to do. My parents grew up during the Depression, so woven into a household of 9 kids and parents, 11 people, frugality was really important. We didn't waste anything. My mom, if we had dinner and there was 1 pork chop left over and 5 green beans, those were frozen and they were put in the freezer for another meal. And so, those types of little things that our parents did, I think, really helped the values that I embrace and hold dearly today. I was only 11 when my father passed away. I want to just speak a little bit about my father, because people might recognize his name. My dad is Michael J. Zone. He was an amazing individual. He was in college at John Carroll University at the time, just before World War II struck. And then when World War II came, since he was in college, he enlisted into the Army. He didn't wait to be drafted, and he went. He felt it was his calling, and did a couple years in there, dating my mom long distance, and became a forward observer. And one of his jobs was he was supposed to go lay out the terrain of different areas where some of the conflict was going to occur. Well, he got captured during just before the Battle of the Bulge in France by Normandy, and he was taken to a concentration camp in Germany called Bad Orb, O-R-B, Bad Orb, B-A-D-O-R-B, and he was taken there in November. This is a Christian network, so I'm going to talk a little bit about how God helped him survive.
Amen.
My father was a devout Christian, a devout Catholic. he felt it was important that he went to Mass every single day. Again, values he passed down to his children. And during that whole time while he was held as a prisoner of war in Germany, he could never go to Mass. He could never take Holy Communion. He could never read Scripture, and that really bothered him. And sure enough, as World War II was coming to an end, it was on, of all days, the irony here, it's just bone chilling. It was on Good Friday. Wow. When General Patton's troops came into this part of Germany. They took over the camp. He was liberated during that time. What my father didn't know is he made friends with this French guy. Unbeknownst to him, it was a French friar, a priest. And on Good Friday, that French priest said Mass, a non-denominational Mass for those who were present. And it was very cathartic for my father. When he went into war, he was about 185 pounds a day. He liberated, he was 135 pounds. So they basically starved him. He lost 60 pounds over the course of 6 months, had a lot of health symptoms as a result of that starvation. But the one thing that kept him alive was his mind and his faith. And he always had dreamt about someday coming home, being reunited with his sweetheart, who was my mom, and having this big family. And one of the most precious heirlooms I have is my mother gave me my father's actual diary that he had with him in World War II. And he wrote daily transcriptions in there. Like, you know, I woke up today, the sun was shining, there was still nothing to eat. And then it's the next day and the next day. But in there, he tells the story about how he wanted to come home and marry the love of his life and have a big family. And sure enough, they had 9 kids.
That's exactly what he did. He prophesied where he was good. That's amazing, Matt. That's an amazing story. You should write a book.
Well, you know what? It's funny you said that, because when my mom, who's no longer with us, she passed away in 2005. But for her 80th birthday, all the siblings, we pooled our money together and we gave her as a Christmas gift. We hired an author who wrote a book about my mom, who was an extraordinary woman, Mary's Own, and it's titled My Way, and many stories in there from all the time, from the period of my mom being a young child to the time growing up. I had mentioned to you that I was only 11 when my father passed away. So my mom was a widow with 4 kids, 18 and under still. You know, the older siblings, they had moved on. And just so for your viewers know a little bit about my commitment to public service and my family's commitment, my father was a councilman for the city of Cleveland from 1960 until he passed away tragically in June of 1974. He was just a couple years younger than I am now. And at that time, it was a sudden heart attack. The doctor thinks it was a lot of stress that occurred as a result of his starvation and war and the stress and the scar tissues put on. But at that time, my father had passed away. George Forbes was the Cleveland City Council president. He knew my family very well. And in fact, his daughter, Helen, and I are the same age, and we've been friends our whole lives. And so George Forbes, Mr. Forbes then, one day came over to my house with several days after my father passed away, after the burial of my father, and sat down with my mom. He came over to our house with a gentleman named Arnold Pinckney, and said to my mom, he said, Mary, you know, there's a year and a half left on your husband's council term. We think you should fill out the balance of his term. And my mom was like a reluctant politician. She was like, no, I don't know. I need to discuss this with my family. So I remember that following Sunday, we had a big Sunday dinner with all my siblings around the table. And we all said, Ma, you have to do it. Just finish out that term. And so my mom, I think, reluctantly said she would. And then she served on Cleveland City Council and subsequently went to win several elections and served from 1974 to 1981. So my dad was elected in 60, he passed away in 74, and then my mom served from 74 to 1981, about 20, almost 22 years total between the two of them.
Wow. So it's in your blood, it's in your DNA. When you were talking about, the foundation and what your family brings to you, that is so important, because as a kid, you don't realize that you're being molded. You're just living your life. This is just what we do. This is our life. And I think about that for myself, even with entrepreneurship. So, growing up, my mom back in the day, they called it a hustler. My mother was a hustler. Now I'm an entrepreneur, right? So I got that hustling DNA inside of me. So that's the foundation for it. It's just what you do. So you don't even think about it. So counsel people, running your family, serving the community runs in your family. You don't even think about it. It's just what you do. It's just what you do. Yeah. But then I know another side of you. But so say what you're gonna say, and then we're gonna talk about that other side. Go ahead.
Well, hold that other side, because maybe we could segue in there. I somewhat consider myself a hustler too. And, when you grow up in a family of 9, you have to be somewhat of a hustler. My mom, I always would say, she loved all of her kids. She had to love some of her kids more than others, and that really gets to the equity issue that we're all trying to grapple with today in society. It's not equality. It's not giving a fair share to everyone, because everyone doesn't need the equal share.
That's right.
And my mom realized that as well. But growing up, I was always an independent person. I was easy to make friends. I'd go off and do my own. And I remember I had my first job when I was 12, delivering the paper, and I was cutting grass and I was shoveling snow. I was a hustler. I was all about
it. That's the same. And people be like, I'm like, I didn't turn into a girl till I got 15. I had all brothers. I'm the only girl. So my brothers carry bags at the grocery store. I carry bags at the grocery store. My brothers had a paper route. I had a paper route. My brothers shovel snow. I shovel snow. So everything my brothers did, I did.
Yeah. So my mom said, you're doing all these things, and you really need to get involved in the community. And right around 1981, just as my mom was coming off of city council, the new rec center was built at West 65th and Lorraine. Former Mayor George Voinovich dedicated and named that rec center after my father, which was a high honor. But then I started volunteering there as a youth counselor and working with kids, because I loved kids, and that morphed into a whole new different thing for me with working with youth and improvisation and dance and different things like that. So I've always considered Pastor T myself a hustler as well.
That's a good thing. So I know that Michael Zone Rec Center is right around the corner from our church. Mm-hmm. So sometimes when we have big events, we even park over there at the Michael J. Zone Rec Center. And it's really a blessing to the community. Mm-hmm. All the things that the rec center does for the community and allows the community to have is really a wonderful thing. So that's an awesome legacy for your family to have, that to be able to be a blessing to so many people moving forward. And then I know that you, as your youth counselor, was that when you started your B-Boy days? Let's talk about your B-Boy days, and then we'll get into our subject for today.
Sure. Well, for those who are viewing this segment who aren't familiar with the rec center, it's on the southeast corner of West 65th and Lorraine. And Pastor T's church is on the southwest corner of West 65th and Lawn. So literally just one block north of the rec center is New Life Ministries, and you do amazing work in our community. We're so thankful for you and Apostle Greg. You do so much for our community. But yeah, when I was a youth counselor, I was trying to figure out, how do I keep these young kids, primarily young boys, how do I keep them active and busy Well, my mother, right after I graduated in June from high school, she sent me to New York City where my brother Marty was living. And she said, look, I want you to spend a week with him and just so a bonding opportunity, because I was at that time I was living at home with three girls. She's like, get away, get to New York, be with your older brother. And here she's a widowed wife, and wants me to bond with some family members. So I go to New York. My brother Marty was an actor. He was living in the East Village, and I just noticed how vibrant the city was. And he told me, he says, you really want to see what New York's all about, go down to 42nd Street. It's like 42nd Street. He goes, it's world, you'll see so many amazing
everything.
Things. Well, I did, and I went to 42nd Street, and I happened to see kids, and they were dancing. They were dancing on a street corner, but they were dancing on cardboard. They were break dancing, and it blew my mind. And I said, you know what? I've always been very gifted athletically, and when you're the youngest boy of 9 siblings, you got four older sisters. I knew how to dance at an early age, so I was like, I'm gonna do this, and I am so down with hip hop. And so I started practicing breakdancing, formed my own breakdancing crew right there at the rec center. That was our home base. We did all our practicing there. And through my youth counseling, I was getting really deep into Cleveland's neighborhoods. Primarily, I was doing counseling at Lakeview Terrace and Riverview Terrace housing projects. And I met some young people there who were also interested in breakdancing. So I formed a regular session where 5 days a week, I had a room reserved for 2 hours at a time. I'd bring a big
boom box.
And would just put mixtapes in after mixtapes, and the kids would come there. And then next thing we know, we formed our crew, and we were extremely successful, where we went on to win many awards. And we were together as an active group performing for about almost 8 years.
And what was the name of your crew again?
So our crew was called Project 5.
Okay.
And we landed on that name because the original foundation of the group was 5 B-boys, but we came across this great mixtape on this album, and it was the name of the group that was performing was called Project 5. I was like, well, there's 5 of us, and we love dancing to this track, so we named our crew Project 5 as a result.
That's so fun. It's so cool. I love to hear that story, because it reminds me, I said, Matt Zone was a B-boy, and I was a lady rapper back in the day, so that's awesome. Awesome, fascinating story. So let's get into our topics for today. I'm not super sure if you are still the president of the National League of Cities. Are you still the president?
I am not I am now, I have the title of immediate past president.
Okay.
Oh, look, I'll hold up my little, I have that card right there. So
when did you stop being the president?
So I became, my term ended in December 31st of 2018. So for all of 19, and the way our organization is structured, so I'll just tell your listeners a little bit about the National League.
Yeah, tell them what it is and all of that kind of stuff. Yeah.
Sure. So it is the chamber organization that represents local government elected leaders. So every mayor and council member in the United States is a member of this association. There's approximately 120,000 mayors and council members in the United States. And so I became very fascinated with the organization. They work on a lot of policy, and there's only been one other Clevelander in the 95-year history to be president of that organization, and that was Mayor George Voinovich in 1985. And it's a rarity that a council member actually ascends to be the president. Typically, it's most